Hello. Let's take a look at liveEx alarms in eHealth. The first thing we'll do is we'll log into our eHealth OneClick Console. Um, in order to make a profile work, a threshold profile on an alarm, you need to have a group. Um, Profiles are applied to groups, not individual elements. So I did a discovery and I created a group and I discovered 4 or 5 servers and all of their children and stuck them right into the group. And in the group, we see that among other things, I have some CPU. And ultimately, that's what we're going to trigger on today. So I'm going to right click on a CPU, anyone randomly really, and we're going to go to the element variable report. And that opens this. And this report provides us with a list of all of the available variables that can be used for reporting and trending. Here we see that CPU utilization is available on the CPU element, so that's the one that we're going to use today for our demonstration. Okay, so we're done with the one-click console. We're going to go instead to the Live Health or Live Exceptions console. This view is called the current view, and if you look here, you see it shows currently active. And if we click on this, we can change it to a historical time frame and see alarms and events from any period. For our demo, we're just going to look at currently active, so I'll cancel out of that. In order to make this work, there are a few steps, and we'll do them in order. We'll go to Setup, and we'll create a trap destination. The trap destination allows us to tell it where to send traps when a threshold is breached. Okay, so I'll create a new one, and I'm going to send my traps to Spectrum, so I'll call it Spectrum Infrastructure Manager Traps. You can call it whatever you want, any logical name for your environment. And I'll put in the IP address of my Spectral server, and the community string will be public. And we'll add that to the list and then say OK. Next, we'll go here and we'll create a Notifier Rule, create a new one. And we can call it whatever we want. So we're going to call it CPU threshold. And typing has never been my strong point. THRESHOLD. And you have a choice of actions. You can run a command, you can send an email, or you can send a trap. In our case, we're going to send a trap. And once we select send a trap, we now have to choose a trap destination, which is why we created that before we created the rule. So now we have a trap destination. We're going to send out a trap when the alarm is raised. And we're also going to send a trap when the alarm is cleared. This is a good place to look for troubleshooting. A lot of times people will be sending these traps to Spectrum and they'll be seeing their alarms being raised in Spectrum but never cleared. And so come here and check, did they add the cleared flag to this particular notifier rule. We're going to alarm on all subjects, that's this here, and we don't need the other fields, so we're going to say OK. We now have it in our list. We'll say OK, and we'll close that window. So now we have a trap destination and a notifier rule to use it. Let's go and make a profile. We'll create a new profile. We'll start it with 0 just so that it'll appear at the top of the list. It makes life easier to sort. And we're going to be triggering on CPU, so we'll just call it CPU. Now we have a profile. Let's highlight it, and down on the bottom we'll create a new rule. And the rules tell it what to do. So the element type we're going to use is we're going to use a system CPU because we're interested in the CPUs and some system servers, Windows mostly, but. And then we're going to change the severity to critical because we want it to turn red. And the message can be anything you want, something with meaning in your environment. Because it's just a demo, I'll call it CPU madness. And I want it to trigger if there's 30 seconds out of a 5-minute polling period. Then I would like to change the variable. And if you remember in our element variable report, the variable we had available was CPU utilization. And so we'll choose CPU utilization percent. And we're going to choose a below threshold of 95%. And this is not a good threshold for a production environment. This is really being used simply because after we poll, we're going to immediately breach, and I'll have something to show you. So in a production environment, you'd choose a better message with more meaning, and you'd choose a better threshold with actual values to your environment. We'll say OK, and now we have a profile with a rule, and we'll say OK. And we only have one more step, and that's to associate everything we've just created with a group. So we go to subjects to monitor, and we choose new. And there's the CPU rule or profile that we created with its rules for threshold breach. And we're going to associate it with the group servers. Now, the group all is here, all groups, and I could also do that, but then I'd end up getting a lot more alarms that might be meaningful to me in my environment. So you throttle the scope of the profile by putting it on a group with the appropriate number of servers for your needs for this profile. Okay, we'll say okay to that, and we see it's now in the list. We'll say okay to that, and it's sent off to the server, and now we're ready to go. So now we're going to wait a few minutes for this to pull out, and we have to pull twice. You have to pull once for a baseline and then once for a delta, and then we'll know immediately that we've breached, and we'll see some events in here. While we're waiting for the polling, I'm going to go up here to Tools, and we're going to look at Monitored Subjects Summary Report. And I'm sorry, we have to highlight the group. And what that will do for us is that will take the group that we've got, and it will compare the rules that we applied to it, and it will tell us how many of them apply to the elements in this group. And this is a great troubleshooting tool to make sure that whatever you've selected actually works for your group right now. And we come in here and we see that, so I dropped it on a group of 114 elements, and 32 of them met the requirements to work with that CPU rule. So we know that this rule should work once we pulled out, and so we'll just wait for it. And voila, there we see we've got a bunch of critical events, and we see that they're all on CPU type elements because that's what we were thresholding on. And we see that the rule message is the CPU madness that we put in there. Thank you. I hope this was helpful. For more detailed information about CA eHealth live exceptions alarms, click the information bubble in the top right corner to load the product page. From there, you can go to product documentation, visit the CA communities, or see the learning path.